Hello and welcome to the MUS136 Week 2 lecture video, Introduction to Baseline Dictation. Before we begin, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the class for the wonderful work you did last week. I made this opinion known, but this is a very strange way to teach oral skills, and the GEs and I are working really hard at trying to deliver this content in an unconventional way. And you guys totally did your part and stepped up in terms of the engagement, in terms of doing your assignments, in terms of the beautiful proto-notation we saw in the dictation assignments. Just really hats off to you. It actually gives us confidence that we'll be able to teach you guys something this term. So thank you for that. So I'm going to go over the introductory information in the packet. You guys may know this, but I actually wrote these packets last year, so these are my own sort of succinct ways of explaining these concepts. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. Baseline dictation and performance. So the first paragraph here is basically just saying baselines are important for all music. So I'll read it. Since the Baroque era, composers of Western music have used the bass part to define the harmonic structure of their compositions. While bass parts often feature the roots of chords, chord tones in the bass other than the tonic have a dramatic effect on the character of the music. In jazz and popular music, the bass line not only outlines the harmony, but also establishes the style and groove of a piece. Again, the takeaway is the bass is super important for all forms of music, so we need to get better at hearing it and get better at orally understanding it. The second paragraph answers this question that we often have this week, and that is, hey, we've been doing baseline melodies all year in our melodic dictations. Why do we spend an entire week doing this? And this paragraph answers that question. We'll be spending the week performing and dictating bass lines in multi-part music. Although we have dictated bass clef melodies all year, focusing on the bass part of a multi-part composition requires a different set of listening skills. Because many people's ears are most sensitive in the treble range, we must learn to listen down to the lowest voice, like we did in practice technique 1, while using peripheral listening skills we practiced last week in our two-part performance and dictations. While students who play bass instruments may find this task easier than others, the skill can be developed by anyone through practice. And again, just wanted to flesh out that idea. Every year I have students come to my office hour when we're doing this the normal way. And they're students oftentimes who spend like all of their musical life in the treble clef, like for example as flute players or other treble clef instruments, and they'll say, man, I've got perfect pitch, my ears are great, like I'm killing this class, but for some reason when it comes to the bass parts, I just have a hard time hearing them. And this week is largely for those students, those of us who spend a living playing the bass, or those of us who are more accustomed to that range, that bass clef range, may just kind of be like, why are we spending a week doing this? And the answer is not all of us have that ability. So for those who need this extra sensitivity to the bass part, the assignments for this week are designed to improve that ability. The third paragraph here basically gives a rundown of what we're going to be doing this week. Practice the sing and play excerpts on the following pages, singing the bass line while performing the other parts of the keyboard. In your dictation assignment, use the same peripheral listening suggestions outlined last week. Through this practice, we will learn that baseline dictation is a natural extension of the melodic dictation we have done all year. This will not only prepare you for harmonic dictation, which we're starting next week, but will sensitize your ears to the two-voice counterpoint between the highest and lowest voice that is the basis of most tonal music. So the takeaway from this is bass lines are important, this is why we're spending a week doing it, and this is what we're going to do to improve your bass line oralization this week. Now, the reality is that if you spend the week doing the assignments in the way that we model in the lecture video and in the singing tests, you're going to get this skill. But some students are still going to feel frustrated that they are having trouble hearing the bass line in a multi-part composition. And for those students, I'm going to offer some suggestions. I'm going to offer 4 suggestions. The first one is already mentioned in here, and that is use practice technique 1. So I'm going to give a quick explanation of that. Practice Technique 1 was introduced in the fall term of this year-long sequence, and the primary objective was to do pitch matching, to be able to hear a pitch and then to be able to auralize and sing the same pitch. But on that sheet there are further instructions for increasing your auralization of the harmonics within a given pitch that you play. And that's going to be really key to being able to identify the fundamental rather than the harmonics above the fundamental when you play. So when you do Practice Technique 1 this week, recommend doing things below middle C. And so as an example, what I meant by the harmonics are that when you play a low note, the harmonics above that note are also present in that sound. Okay, and so our ears are naturally going to gravitate to the harmonics that are in the most sensitive part of our hearing. We, the GEs and myself, have really great anecdotal evidence about that, and that is when we are testing students on Practice Technique 1 in the beginning of the year, the most common error is to hear the fifth rather than the fundamental, and that shows us that our ears are more sensitive in that treble range than they are in the low range. By the way, that happens most commonly when they play a low note as their random pitch for Practice Technique 1. So I have posted Practice Technique 1, the instructions, in this discussion, and I've also posted a link to the Practice 1 video from fall term at the bottom of this discussion. So check that out. That's going to be super, super helpful. So another thing you can do to improve your sensitivity to the bass part and multi-part music this week is to apply the principles articulated in Practice Technique 4 for all the material in the week. In the next video, part 2 of the lecture, I go over Practice Technique 7, and in Practice Technique 7, I model how to utilize the principles from Practice Technique 4. Specifically, you're changing the balance knob between the different voices, between the one that you're hearing and the one that you're performing. And I do that specifically in relation to Practice Technique 7. But if you apply those same principles to all of your content this week, your ability to hear the bass line will improve. So the third strategy you can employ for improving your sensitivity to the bass part and multi-part music of this week is to take your sing and play examples and reinvent them as the Karpinski arpeggiation exercises that we've had for the last 2 terms. I'm going to demonstrate how to do that in 37.1, which is the first example in the week 2 excerpts, the bass part sing and play. And it also happens to be the excerpt that you'll be playing for your singing test. So here's our home key for that. So whereas when you perform this, you'll perform Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, Sol, La, Do, Sol. What you'll do instead is you will identify A, where the harmony changes, or B, where there's an important chord inversion change, and apply the Karpinski arpeggiations to the music. So for example, on beat 1 of the first measure, the bass note is Do, so you'll sing Do, Me, So, Me, Do. Or if you wanted to be strict Karpinski about it, Do, Me, So, Me, Do. On beat 3, we have So in the bass, an inversion change of the tonic harmony. So we've got So, Do, Me, Do, So. Again, strict Karpinski. So, Do, Me, Do, So. On beat 1 of the second measure, we have a chord change. So we can sing each one of these going up from the bass. Le, Do, Fa, Le, Do, Fa, Do, Le. Again, strict Karpinski. Le, Do, Fa, Do, Le. And then back on beat 3 of that measure to our tonic chord with So in the bass. So, Do, Me, Do, So. I did this pretty quickly. When you're practicing on your own, you'll want to do this really slowly and really auralize each of these. This will help you to hear the voices other than the bass part so that you can be aware of those, but while aurally focusing on the bass part. So the fourth strategy you can employ for sensitizing your ears to the bass part in multi-part music and the material this week is you can take your dictation assignment MP3s and cheat by putting them into a wave editing software so that you're able to listen even more deeply to these excerpts than you would if you were just following our guidelines for dictation quizzes and dictation assignments. Now I say cheat because we always tell you, not to listen to the examples this way. But in this case, the benefit of doing this deep listening is worth doing it this way. So I'm actually going to demonstrate how to do this with a screen share. And before I do, I wanted to let you know that if you are already familiar with using a program like GarageBand or Logic, you can do the same thing in those programs. I'm going to demonstrate using a program called Audacity, and the reasons for that are, number one, it's free, number two, it's super easy to use, so if there are members of the class that don't have experience using wave editing software, that's a really great place to start. You're going to start this by just downloading the MP3 from Canvas onto your device. And by the way, Audacity is also available on mobile devices as well as laptops. So step one is just to take your MP3 and download it, and then I will meet you in a second on the screen share. Okay, so as you can see, I have Audacity open my computer, and what I've done is I've gone to Canvas and identified one of the dictation assignment examples, one of the MP3s. In this case, it's 37.6, and I've downloaded it onto my device and opened it in Audacity. And the point of this is I'm going to use Audacity, the most basic functions in Audacity, in this case just the selection tool and the play tool, to improve my understanding of the bass part of this excerpt. So I'm going to go right at the beginning, I'm going to hit spacebar to play, spacebar again to stop, and when I hear something in the bass part that I'd like to hear better, I'm going to stop. Okay, we can hear on that third voicing, something happens in the bass part, it moves twice as fast. I'm going to put the selection tool in front of it. I'm going to hit play to listen to it a few times. And as I play it, the bass line will start coming into focus, and I'll recognize that the bass part there goes do, te, le. And again, just play it as many times as you have to make sure that it really gets into focus. Another incredibly useful tool is to take the selection tool, click and drag over one of the voicings that you'd like to hear better, and hit Shift and Spacebar to loop it. And I'm going to listen really deeply to what I'm hearing, up and down the texture. Ask myself, do I hear the bass part? If you don't at first, don't worry. Just keep listening and it'll come into focus. Then I'll ask myself, what solfege syllable is the bass part on? And in this case, not surprisingly, it's do. It's the do at the top of the staff and bass clef. And go ahead and sing it. Do. Listen up and down the texture, shining a flashlight on the inner voices and then the upper voice. We don't have to transcribe the upper part this week, but we will next week. So I'm going to listen for that upper part and ask myself what scale degree is in the upper part. And you can hear that it's May. Go ahead and sing May along with this. May. In this case it's an octave higher, but that's fine. And just listen up and down the texture, focusing on what you want to hear better. For this week, it's the bottom part, but next week it might be the top part. So
this is how you can use Audacity to cheat on your dictation assignments, but overall improve your peripheral listening and how well you're hearing individual voices better.
So that concludes part 1 of the Week 2 lecture video. In part 2, we're going to be taking a look at practice technique 7, and in part 3, we're going to be doing an in-class guided dictation. So enjoy.